Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel here is Discerning What is True. I'm actually on Facebook Live, actually on um, YouTube and on Odyssey tonight. Um, Today is the 17th day of February 2023, and I'm going to continue to read a book here simply called Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And wanted to say something else. Hopefully, we'll be doing a book by Walter Lippmann, who is also involved with this whole deal. There's a massive change taking place at this time. You can tell that there are people being put in different positions. This is in the 1920s, and this was also a money deal. What I mean by money deal, I mean that people began to feel more comfortable about their banking deal and they started spending more money, got involved in the stock market, and they were also basically encouraged to do that, but it actually come to be a detrimental effect upon them. So let's get to the point here in the particular book in reading chapter 5 called Business and the Public. Hope you enjoy it. Again, this is all these advertisements we hear. This is the basics of it, okay? It's a psychological view. And what you said earlier in this chapter 4 was relating to simply is um, the idea is to be planted in your head that you actually came up with the idea yourself. So there would be what I would call part of your thinking would be, I thought about this and this is what I want. You see, not knowing that the advertisement or propaganda itself had actually suggested that to you. The relationship between business and public has become closer in the past few days. Business today is taking the public into partnership. A number of causes, some economic, others due to the growing public understanding of business and the public interest in business, have produced this situation. Business realizes that its relationship to the public is not confined to the manufacture and sale of a given product, but includes at the same time the selling of itself and of all those things for which it stands in the public mind. 20 or 25 years ago, business sought to run its own affairs regardless of the public. The reaction was the mud-wrecking period in which a multitude of sins were justly and unjustly laid in the chains of charge of the interests. And in the face of the aroused public consensus, or conscience that is, the larger corporations were obliged to renounce their contentions that their affairs were nobody's business. If today's big business were to seek to follow the public, a new reaction similar to that of 20 years ago would take place and the public would rise and try to follow big business with restrictive laws. Business is conscious of the public conscious, that is. This consciousness has led to a healthy corporation. You see that the whole idea here is planning simply is like they're putting on a good face, you see. Another cause for the increasing relationship is undoubtedly to be found in the various phenomenon growing out of mass production. Mass production is profitable only if its rhythm can be maintained. That is, if it can continue to sell its product in steadily or increasing quantity. The result is that while under the handcraft or small unit system of production was that typical a century ago, demand created the supply. Today's supply must actively seek to create its corresponding demand. A single factory, potentially capable of supplying a whole continent with its particular product, cannot afford to wait until the public asks for its product. It must maintain a constant touch through advertising and propaganda with the vast public in order to assure itself of continuous demand, which alone will make its costly plant profitable. This entails a vastly more complex system of distribution than formerly. To make customers is the new problem. One must understand not only his own business, but the manufacture of a particular product, but also the structure, the personality, the prejudice of a potential universal public. Still another reason is to be found is the improvements in the technique of advertising. As a result, as regards both the size of the public which can be reached by the printed word and the methods of appeal, the growth of newspapers and magazines having a circulation of millions of copies, and the art of the modern advertising expert in making the printed messages attractive and persuasive have placed the businessman in a personal relation with a vast diversified public. Another modern phenomenon which influences the general policy of business is the new competition between certain firms and the remainder, that is, so to say, of the industry to which they belong, You see, another kind of competition is between whole industries in their struggle for a share of the consumer dollar. When, for example, a soap manufacturer claims that his product will preserve youth, he's obviously attempting to change the public mode of thinking about soap in general, a thing of great importance to the whole industry. Or when the metal furniture industry seeks to convince the public that it is more desirable to spend its money for metal furniture than for wood furniture. It is clearly seeking to alter the taste and standards of a whole generation. In either case, business is seeking to interject itself into the lives and customs of millions of persons. Even in the basic sense, business is becoming dependent on public opinion. With the increasing volume and widely diffusion of wealth in America, thousands of persons now invest in industrial stocks, new stock or bond flotations upon which the expanding business must depend for its success can be effective only if the concern has understood how to gain the confidence and goodwill of the general public. Business must express itself and its entire corporate existence so that the public will understand and accept it. It must dramatize its personality and interpret its adjectives in every particular in which it comes into contact with the community or the nation of which it is part. An oil corporation which truly understands its many-sided relations to the public will offer that public not only good oil but a sound labor policy. A bank will seek to show not only that its management is sound and conservative, but also that its offices are honorable both in the public and in the private life. A store specializing in fashionable men's clothing will express its architectural of the authenticity of the goods it offers. A baker will seek to impress the public with the hygienical care observed in its manufacturing process, not only by wrapping the loaves in a dust-proof paper and throwing its factory open to public inspection, but also by cleanliness and attractiveness of its delivery wagons. A construction firm will take care that the public knows not only that its buildings are durable and safe, but also its employees, when injured at work, are compensated. And whatever point a business enterprise impinges on the public consciousness, it must seek to give its public relations the particular character which will conform to the objectives which it is pursuing. In other words, what he's saying simply is putting the best foot forward. In other words, it's how propaganda works here is what he's saying, is showing what you're all about, revealing what you're all about. And basically, I wouldn't say glamorizing it, but basically putting a trust, giving you the opportunity to trust in them is what he wants to do. Just as the production manager must be familiar with every element and detail concerning the materials with which he is working, so the man in charge of the firm's public relations must be familiar with the structure, the prejudice, and the whims of the general public, and must handle his problems with the utmost care. The public has its own standards and demands and habits. You may modify them, but you dare not run counter to them. You cannot persuade a whole generation of women to wear long skirts, but you may, by working through leaders of fashion, swear them to wear evening dresses which are long in back. The public is not an amorphous mass which can be molded at will or dictated to. Both business and the public have their own personalities which must somehow be brought into a friendly agreement. Conflict and suspicion are injurious to both. Modern business must study on what terms the partnership can be made amicably and mutually beneficial. It must explain itself, its aims, its objectives to the public in terms which the public can understand and is willing to accept. Business does not willingly accept dictates from the public. It should not expect that it can dictate to the public, while the public should appreciate the great economic benefits which business offers, thanks to mass production and scientific marketing. Business should also appreciate that public is becoming increasingly discriminative in its standards and should seek to understand its demands and meet them. Relationship between business and the public can be healthy only if it is the relationship of give and take. It is this condition and necessary which has created the need for specialized field of public relations. Business now calls in the Public Relations Council to advise it, to interpret its purpose to the public, and to suggest these modifications which may make it conform to the public demand. The modifications then recommend to make the business comfort to its objectives and to the public demand may concern the broadest matters of public policy or the apparent most trivial details of execution. It might, in one case, be necessary to transform entirely the lines of goods sold to conform to changing public demands. In other cases, the trouble may be found to lie in such small matters as the dress or dress of the clerks. The jewelry store may complain that its patrons is shrinking upward because of its reputation for carrying high-priced goods. In this case, the Public Relations Council might suggest the feature of a medium-priced goods even at a loss, not because the firm deserves. I'm sorry, not because the firm desires a large medium-priced trade as such, but because out of 100 medium-priced customers acquired today, a certain percentage will be well-to-do 10 years from now. The department store which is seeking to gather the high-class trade may be urged to employ college graduates as clerks or to engage well-known modern artists to design show windows or special exhibits. A bank may be urged to open a Fifth Avenue branch, not because the actual business done on Fifth Avenue warrants the expense, but because a beautiful Fifth Avenue office correctly expresses the kind of appeal which it wishes to make to future depositors. And viewed in this way, it may be as important that the doorman be polite or that the floors be kept clean as the branch manager be an able financier. Yet the beneficial effect of this branch may be canceled if the wife of the president is involved in a scandal. Big business studies every move which may express its true personality. It seeks to tell the public in all appropriate ways by the direct advertising message and by the subjectless aesthetic suggestion the quality of the goods or services which it has to offer. A store which seeks a large sales volumes and cheap goods will preach prices day in, day out, concentrated in its whole appeal on the ways in which it can save money for its clients. But a store seeking a high margin of profit on individual sales will try to associate itself with the distinguished and the elegant, whether by exhibition of the old masters or through the social activities of the owner's wife. The public relations activities of a business cannot be a protective coloring to hide its real aims. It is bad business as well as bad morals to feature exclusively a few high-class articles when the main stock of this medium grade are cheap, or the general impression given is a false one. A sound public relations policy will and not attempt to stampede the public with exaggerated claims and false pretenses, but to interpret the individual business vividly and truly through every avenue that leads to public opinion. The New York Central Railroad has for decades sought to appeal to the public not only on the basis of speed and safety of the trains, but also on the basis of their elegance and comfort. It's appropriate that the corporation should have personified to the general public in the person of so swayed and integrating a gentleman as Chauncey M. Depew, an ideal window dressing for such an enterprise. While the concrete recommendation of the Public Relations Council may vary infinitely according to individual circumstances, its general plan of work may be reduced to two types, shall by term continuous interpretation and dramatization by high spotting. The two may be alternate or may be pursued concurrently. Continuous interpretation is achieved by trying to control every approach to the public mind in such a manner that the public receives the desired impression, often without being conscious of it. High spotting, on the other hand, vividly seizes the attention of the public and fixes it upon some detail or aspect which is typical of the entire enterprise. When a real estate corporation which is erecting a tall office building makes it 10 feet taller than the highest skyscraper that is dramatization. Which method is indicated or whether both the indirectly concurrent can be determined only after a full study of objectives and specific possibilities. Another interesting case of focusing public attention on the virtues of the product was shown in the case of gelatin. Its advantages in increasing the digestible and nutritional value of milk were proven in the Mellon Institute of Industrial Research. The suggestion was made and carried out that to further this knowledge, gelatin be used by certain hospitals and school systems to be tested out there. The favorable results of such tests were then projected to other leaders in the field with the result that they followed that group's leadership and utilized gelatin for the scientific purpose which had been proven to be sound at the research institution. The idea carries momentum. The tendency of big business is to get bigger. Through mergers and monopolies, it is constantly increasing the number of persons with whom it is in direct contact. All this has intensified and multiplied by the public relations of businesses. The responsibilities are of many kinds. There is a responsibility to the stockholders, numbering perhaps 5 persons or 500,000 who have entrusted their money to the concern and have the right to know how the money is being used. A concern which is fully aware of their responsibilities towards its stockholders will furnish them with frequent letters urging them to use the product in which their money is invested and use their influence to promote its sale. It has a responsibility towards the dealer which is may express by inviting him at its expense. This is the home factory. It has a responsibility towards the industry as a whole, which should restrain it from making exaggerated and unfair selling claims. It has a responsibility towards the retailer and will see to it that its salesmen express the quality of the product which they have to sell. There's a responsibility towards the consumer, who is pressed by a clean and well-managed factory open to his inspection. And the general public, apart from its function as a potential customer or consumer, is influenced in its attitude towards the concern by what it knows of that concern's financial dealings, its labor policy, even by the livableness of the houses in which its employees dwell. There is no detail too trivial to influence the public in a favorable or unfavorable sense. The personality of the president may be a matter of importance, for he perhaps dramatizes the whole concern to the public mind. It may be very important to what charities he contributes, in what civil societies he holds office. If he is a leader in the industry, the public may demand that he be a leader in his community. The businessman has become a responsible member of the social group. It's not a question about ballyhoo or creating a picturesque fiction for public consumption. It's merely a question of finding the appropriate modes of expressing the personality that is to be dramatized. Some businessmen can be their own best public relations counsel, but in the majority of cases, knowledge of the public mind and of the ways in which it will react to an appeal is a specialized function which must be undertaken by a professional expert. You see, that's what they're saying. That's telling you that. Big business, I believe, is realizing that more and more it is increasingly availing itself of the services of the specialized in public relations, whatever may be the title, according to him. And it is my conviction that as big business becomes bigger, the need for expert manipulation of the innumerable contacts with the public will become greater. One reason the public reactions, sorry, one of the reasons the public relations of a business are frequently placed into the hands of an outside expert instead of being confined to an officer of the company is that the fact that the correct approach to a problem may be indirect. For example, when the luggage industry attempted to solve some of its problems by a public relations policy, it was realized that the attitude of railroads, of steamship companies, and of foreign government-owned railroads was an important factor in the handling of luggage. If a railroad and a baggage man for their own interests can be educated to handle baggage with more facility and promptness with less damage to the baggage and less inconvenience to the passenger, if the steamship company lets down in its sorry, if the steamship company lets down in its own interest, its restrictions are luggage. If the foreign government eases up on its baggage costs and transportation in order to further tourist travel, then the luggage manufacturers will profit, you see. The problem then to increase the sale of their luggage was to have these and other forces come over to their point of view. Hence, the public relations campaign was directly not to the public, who were the ultimate customers, but to their other elements, you see. Also, if the luggage manufacturer can educate the general public on what to wear on trips and when to wear it, he may be increasing the sale of men's and women's clothing too, but he will at the same time be increasing the sale of the luggage. You see, propaganda, since it goes to basic causes, can very often be more effective through the manner of its introduction. A campaign against unhealthy cosmetics might be waged by fighting for a return to the washcloth and soap, a fight that very logically might be taken up by health officials all over the country, who would urge the return to sanitary and helpful washcloth and soap instead of cosmetics. The developments of public opinion for a cause of line or social constructive actions may very often be the result of a desire on the party of the propagandist to meet successfully his own problem, which the socialist constructive cause would further. And by doing so, he's actually fulfilling a social purpose in the broadest terms. The soundness of a public relations policy was likewise shown in the case of a shoe manufacturer who made service shoes for patrolmen and for firemen, letter carriers, letter carriers, and men in similar occupations. Take a break. He realized that if he could make acceptable the idea that men in such work ought to be well shod, he would sell more shoes and at the same time further the efficiency of his men. He organized as part of his business a foot protection bureau. The bureau disseminates scientific and accurate information on the proper care of the feet, principles which the manufacturer has incorporated in the construction of the shoes. The result was that the civil bodies, police officers, fire chiefs, and other interested in the welfare and comfort of their men furthered the idea his product stood for and the product itself, with the consequence effect that more of his shoes were sold more easily. The application of this principle of a common denominator of interest between the object that is sold and the public goodwill can be carried to infinite degrees. It matters not how much capital you may have, how fair the rates may be, how favorable the condition of service. If you haven't behind you a sympathetic public opinion, you're bound to fail. This is the opinion of Samuel Insull, Insull, one of the foremost traction magnates of the country, and the late Judge Gary of the United States Steel Corporation expressed the same idea when he said, once you have the goodwill of the general public, you can go ahead in the work of the construction and expansion. Too often, many try to discount this vague and intangible element. That way lies destruction. Public opinion is no longer inclined to be unfavorable to the large business mergers. It resents the censorship of business by the Federal Trade Commission, has broken down the antitrust laws where it thinks they hinder economic development. It backs great trusts and mergers which accelerated a decade ago. The government now permits large aggregations of producing and distributing units, as evident by mergers among railroads and other public utilities. Because representative government reflects public opinion. Public opinion itself fosters the growth of mammoth industrial enterprises. In the opinion of millions of small investors, mergers and trusts are friendly giants and not orgies. Because of the economy, because of the economics, mainly due to quantity production which they have affected and can pass on to the consumer. The result has been, to a great extent, obtained by deliberate use of propaganda in its broadest sense. It was attained not only by modifying the opinion of the public, as the governments modify and marshal the opinion of their publics during the war, but often by modifying the business concern itself. A cement company may work with road commissions gradually to maintain testing laboratories in order to ensure the best quality roads to the public. A gas company maintains a free school of cookery, you see. Continue. But it would be rash and unreasonable to take it for granted that because public opinion has come over to the side of big business, it will always remain there. Only recently, Professor W.Z. Ripley of Harvard University, one of the foremost national authorities on business organization and practice, exposed certain aspects of big business which tend to undermine public confidence in large corporations. He pointed out that the stockholders' supposed voting power is often illusionary, that annual financial statements are sometimes so brief and summary that to the man in the street they are downright misleading, that the extension of the system of non-voting shares often places the effective control of the corporation and their finances in the hands of a small clique of stockholders. And that same corporation refuses to give out sufficient information to permit the public to know the true condition of the concern. Furthermore, no matter how favorable disposed the public be towards big business in general, the utilities are always fair game for public discontent and need to maintain goodwill with their greatest care and watchfulness. These and other corporations of a similar public character will always have to face a demand for government or municipal ownership if such attacks as those of Professor Ripley are continued are, in the public opinion, justified unless conditions are changed and care is taken to maintain the contact with the public at all points of their corporate existence. The Public Relations Council should anticipate such trends of public opinion and advise on how to avert them, either by convincing the public that its fears or prejudices are unjustified, or in certain cases, by modifying the actions of the client to the extent necessary to remove the cause of complaint. In such a case, public opinion might be subverted and the points of irreducible opposition discovered. The aspects of the situation which are susceptible of logic explanation to in what extent the criticism or prejudice is a habitual emotional reaction and what factors are dominant accepted cliches might be disclosed to in each instance be in each instance he would advise some action or modification of policy calculated to make the readjustment. This whole thing is what he's talking about simply is putting a good rapport on people. And it doesn't take long to figure this out. And I'll give you an illustration right now. It's been taking place for the last week and a half, actually about 10 days. There's the whole issue of the situation in Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, in Ohio with the railroad. And I mentioned it also somewhere else. I don't know if I did it in Facebook or wherever. The company is Norfolk Southern, and they've got some problems, and it's going to rear up on them because people are beginning to see that, because the media is saying things about Norfolk Southern, the railroad company, that they've had other accidents recently in some other places, and so this jars the mind. And then how they handle the situation there in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, also tells me simply is, did they really care about their neighbors? Okay. Why were they in such a hurry to get this done? And they already got it done. They've already got it, the whole thing done, everything. And what it seems to be, the whole idea of what took place was the expediency of getting that line, that railroad line, back as quickly as possible, because it wasn't, the lines were both out. In other words, there are two lines, there are two train tracks here going on, and they're vitally important for them to be moving traffic. And obviously they've had to reroute their traffic a different way, which is not what they want to do. They don't have the manpower to do that. Also, they would have to do a massive deal. They calculated what they did, which is this whole idea of what I call is control, not a controlled burn, but a controlled explosion. But it didn't work out. Now the key is simply is, have we been misled by this whole situation with the media, or did they do such a bad job? Now, that's how this whole thing affects a company, and it affects people's public opinion about the railroad. But maybe years down later, someone is in the company and whatever, and the problem becomes that he remembers this whole situation about Norfolk Southern, and he chooses to go to another competitor, which is CSX, the other railroad company in the East, to see if he can get a better service or whatever. That's what's in his mind. You see, that's how it goes in his mind. You see. So this is what he's talking about here, a lot to do with that in this whole framework. It's far more, even more technical than just what I've said also. While government ownership in its most instances only varying in a remote possibility, public ownership of big business through the increasing popular investment in stocks and bonds, it becomes more and more a fact. The importance of public relations from this standpoint is to be judged by the fact that practically all prosperous corporations expect at some time to enlarge operations and will need to float new stocks or bond issues. The success of such issues depends upon the general record of concern of the business world, and also upon the goodwill which it has been able to create in general public. When the Victor, VICTOR, talking machine company was recently offered to the public, millions of dollars worth of stock was sold overnight. On the other hand, there were certain companies which, although they were financially sound and commercially prosperous, would be unable to float a large stock issue because public opinion is conscious of them or has some unanalyzed prejudice against them. You see, just what I just said about the railroad company. To such an extent, the successful floating of stocks and bonds depend upon the public favor that the success of a new merger may stand or fall upon the public's acceptance which is created for it. A merger may bring into existence huge new resources, and those resources, perhaps amounting to millions of dollars in a single operation, can often fairly be said to have been created by the expert manipulation of public opinion. It must be repeated that I'm not speaking of artificial value given to a stock by dishonest propaganda or stock manipulation, but of the real economic values which are created when genuine public acceptance is gained for an industrial enterprise and becomes a real partner in it. The growth of big business is so rapid that in some lines, ownership is more international than national. It is necessary to reach ever larger groups of people in modern industry and commerce are to be financed. Americans have purchased billions of dollars of foreign industrial securities since the war, and the Europeans own, it is estimated between $1 and $2 billion worth of ours. In each case, public acceptance must be obtained for the issue and the enterprise behind it. Public loans, state or municipal, to foreign countries depend upon the goodwill which their countries have been able to create for themselves here. An attempt issued by an East European country is fairly badly, largely because of the unfavorable public reaction to behavior of members of the ruling family. But other countries have no difficulty in placing any issue because the public is already convinced of the prosperity of these nations and the stability of their governments. And what he's talking about here simply is he's talking about Eastern European countries. So I can see what he's talking about. He states that. So that's talking about these countries like Hungary, Romania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, those kind of countries at that time, if there were such those countries. They're not seen in the public eye as being what I call able to pay back their loans or something of that nature. That's what I'm speculating on here. That's just what they do, you see. But there's also, we had to understand that the media itself is not always true, are they? They can be biased. So the new technique of public relations counsel is serving a very useful purpose in business by acting as a complement to legitimate advertisers and advertising and helping to break down unfair competitive exaggerations and over-emphatic advertising by reaching the public what is true to other channels than advertising. Where two competitors in a field are fighting each other with this type of advertising, they're undermining that particular industry to a point where the public may lose confidence in the whole industry. The only way to combat such unethical methods is for ethical members of the industry to use the weapon of propaganda in order to bring out the best truths of the situation. Take the case of toothpaste, for instance. Here's a highly competitive field in which the preponderance of public acceptance of one product over another can be very legitimate, rest in inherited values. However, what has happened in this field? One or two of the largest manufacturers have asserted advantages for their toothpaste, which no single toothpaste discovered up to the present time can possibly have. The competing manufacturers put in the position either overemphasizing an already exaggerated emphasis of letting the overemphasis of his competitor take away his markets. He turns to the weapon of propaganda, which can effectively, through various channels of approach to public, the dental clinic, the schools, the women's club, the medical college, the dental press, and even the daily press, bring to the public the truth of what a toothpaste can do. This will, of course, have its effect in making the honestly advertising toothpaste gets to its real public. Propaganda is potent in meeting unethical or unfair advertisement. Effectively, advertising has become more costly than ever before. Years ago, when the company was smaller and there was no tremendous advertising machinery, it was comparatively easy to get countrywide recognition for a product. A corps of traveling salesmen might persuade the retailers when a reel with a few cigars and a repertoire of funny stores to display and recommend their articles on a nationwide scale. Today, the small industry is swamped unless it can find appropriate, relevant, inexpensive means of making known the special virtues of its product, while larger industries have sought to overcome the difficulties by cooperative advertising in which associations of industry compete with other associates. Mass advertising has produced new kinds of competition between rival products, in the same line, of course, as old as economic life itself. In recent years, much has been said of the new competitors. We have discussed it in the previous chapter between one group of products and another. Stone competes against wood for building, linoleum against carpets, oranges against apples, tin against asbestos for roofing. This type of competition has been humorously illustrated by Mr. O.H. Cheney, Vice President of the American Exchange and Irving Trust Company of New York, in his speech before the Chicago Business Forum. Do you represent the millenarian trade? Said Mr. Cheney. The man at your side may serve the fur industry and promoting the style of big fur collars on women's coats. He is ruining the hat business by forcing women to wear small and inexpensive hats. You may be interested in the ankles of the fair sex. I mean, you may represent the silk hosiery industry. You have two brave rivals who are ready to fight to the death, to spend millions in the fight for the glory of those ankles. The leather industry, which has suffered from the low show vogue, and the fabrics manufacturers who yearn for the good old days when skirts were skirts. If you represent the plumbing and heating business, you are the moral enemy of the textile industry because warmer homes means lighter clothes. If you represent the printers, how can you shake hands with the radio equipment man? These are really only obvious forms of what I have called the new competition. The old competition was that between the members of each trade organizations. One phase of the new competition is that between the trade associates themselves, between you gentlemen who represent those industries. Inter-commodity competition is the new competition between products used alternatively for the same purposes. Inter-industrial competition is the new competitor between apparently unrelated industries which affect each other, or between such industries as compete for the consumer dollar, and that means practically all industries. Intercommodity competition is, of course, the most spectacular of all. It is one which seems most of all to have caught the business imagination of the country. More and more businessmen are beginning to appreciate what intercommodity competition means to them. More and more they are calling upon their trade associates to help them, because intercommodity competition cannot be fought single-handed. Take the Great War on the dining room table, for instance. 3 times a day, practically every dining room table in the country is the scene of a fierce battle in the competition. Shall we have prunes for breakfast? No, cries the embattled orange grower and the massed legions of pineapple counters. Shall we eat sauerkraut? Why not eat green olives? Olives is the answer of the Spaniards. Eat macaroni as a change from potatoes, saying one advertiser. And will the potato growers take the challenge lying down? No, they won't. The doctors and the dietitians tell us that a normal, hard-working man needs only about 2,000 or 3,000 calories of food every day. A banker, I suppose, needs a little less. But what am I to do? The fruit growers, the wheat raisers, the meat packers, the milk producers, the fishermen all want me to eat more of their products and are spending millions of dollars a year to convince me. And am I to eat the point of exhaustion, or am I to obey the doctor and let the farmer and the food packers and the retailer go broke? Am I to balance my diet in the proportion, the advertising proportion of the various products, or am I to balance my diet scientifically and let those who overproduce go bankrupt? New competition is probably keenest in the food industry because we have a very real limitation of what we can consume. Despite our higher incomes and higher living standards, we cannot eat more than we can eat. I believe that competitors or competition in the future will not be only on advertisement competition between individual products or between big associates, but that it will in addition be a competition of propaganda. The businessman and the advertising man has realized that he must not discard entirely the methods of Barnum in reaching the public. An example of the annuals of George Harrison Phelps of the successful utilization of this type of appeal was the nationwide hookup, which announced the launching of the Dodge Victory 6 car. Millions of people, it is estimated, listened to his program, broadcast over 47 stations. The expense was more than $60,000. The arrangement involved an additional telephone hookup of 20,000 miles of wire, including transmission from Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, and New York. Al Jolson did his bid from New Orleans, Will Rogers from Beverly Hills, Fred and Dorothy Stone from Chicago, and Paul Whiteman from New York, as a graduate artist fee of $25,000. And there was included a 4-minute address by the president of Dodge Brothers announcing the new car, which gave him access in 4 minutes to an estimated audience of 30 million Americans, the largest number unquestionably ever to concentrate their attention on a given commercial product at a given moment. It was a sugar-coated sales message, you see. Modern sales technicians will object. What you said of this method of appeal is true, but it increases the cost of getting the manufacturing message across. The modern tendency has been to reduce the costs, for example, the elimination of premiums, and concentrate on getting full efficiency from the advertising expenditure. If you hire a Galley Curie to sing for bacon, you increase the cost of the bacon by the amount of her very large fee. Her voice adds nothing to the product, but it adds to its cost. Undoubtedly, but all modes of sales appeals require the spending of money to make the appeal attractive. The advertiser in print adds to the cost of his measures by the use of pictures or by the cost of getting distinguished endorsements. There's another kind of difficulty created in the process of big business, getting bigger, which calls for new modes of establishing contact with the public. Quality production offers a standardized product, the cost of which tends to diminish with the quantity sold. If low price is the only basis of competition with rival products similarly produced, this ensures a cutthroat competition which can end only by taking all the profit and incentives out of the industry. The logical way out of this dilemma is for the manufacturer to develop some sales appeal other than mere cheapness, to give the product in the public mind some other attraction, some idea that will modify the product slightly some element of originality that will distinguish it from products in the same line. Thus, the manufacturer of typewriters paints his machines in cheerful hues. This special type of appeal can be popularized by the manipulation of principles familiar to the propagandist. The principle of gregarious, obedience to authority, emulation, and the like. A minor element can be made to assume economic importance by being established in the public mind as a matter of style. Mass production can be split up. Big business will still leave room for small business. Next to a huge department store, there may be located a tiny specialty shop, which makes a very good living. The problem of bringing large hats back into fashion was untaken by propagandists. The militant industry 2 years ago was minced by the prevalence of the simple felt that hat which was crowding out the manufacture of all other kinds of hats and hat ornaments. It was found that hats could roughly be classified in six types. It was found too that 4 groups might help to change hat fashions: the society leader, the style expert, the fashion editor, and the writer, the artist who might give artistic approval to the styles, and the beautiful mannequins. The problem then was to bring these groups together before an audience of hat buyers. A committee of prominent artists were organized to choose the most beautiful girls in New York to wear in a series of tableaux, the most beautiful hats in the style classification as a fashion fete at a leading hotel. A committee was formed of distinguished American women who, on the basis of their interest in the development of American industry, were willing to add the authority of their names to the idea. A style committee was formed of editors of fashion magazines and other prominent fashion authorities who were willing to support the idea. The girls in their lovely hats and costume paraded on the running board before an audience of the entire trade. The news of the event affected the buying habits not only of the onlookers, but also the women throughout the country. The story of the event was flashed to the consumer by her newspaper as well as by advertisers of her favorite store. Broadsides went to the militant buyers from the manufacturers. One manufacturer stated that whereas before the show he had not sold any large trim hats after he had sold thousands. Often the public relations is called in to handle an emergency situation. A false rumor, for instance, may occasionally enormous loss in prestige and money is not handled properly and effectively. Incidents such as this, once described in New York American of Friday, May 21st, 1926, shows that the lack of proper technical handling of public relations might result in, well, $1 million lost by false rumor on Hudson stock. Hudson Motor Company stock fluctuated widely around noon yesterday, and losses estimated at $500,000 to $1 million were suffered as a result of a widespread rotation of false news regarding dividend action. The directors met in Detroit at 12:30 New York time to act on the dividend. Almost immediately, a false report that only the regular dividend had been declared was circulated. At 12:46, the Dow Jones and Company ticker service received the report from the stock exchange firm, and its publication resulted in a further drop in the stock. Shortly after 1 o'clock, the ticker service received official news that the dividend had been increased and 20% stock distribution authorized. They rushed the correct news out on the tickers, and the Hudson stock immediately jumped more than 6 points. A clipping from the Journal of Commerce on April 4, 1925 is reproduced here as an interesting example of a method to counteract a false rumor. Beechnut head hometown guests. Barclay Signal, honored by communities of Mohawk Valley. In Canajoharie, New York, April 3rd, today was Beechnut Day in this town, in fact, in the Mohawk Valley. Businessmen and practically the whole community of this region joined in a personal testimony to Bartlett Arkell of New York City, president of the Beechnut Packing Company of this city, in honor of his firm's refusal to consider selling his company to other financial interests to move elsewhere. When Mr. Arkell publicly denied recent rumors that he was to sell his company to Postum Cereal Company for $17 million, which would have resulted in taking the industry from his birthplace, he did so in terms conspicuously loyal to his boyhood home, which he had built up in a prosperous industrial community through 30 years management of the Beechnut Company. He absolutely controls the business and flatly states that he will never sell it during his lifetime to anyone at any price, since it would be disloyal to his friends and fellow workers. And the whole Mohawk Valley spontaneously decided that such spirit deserved public recognition, hence today's festivals. More than 3,000 people participated, headed by a committee comprising of W.J. Roser, Chairman, B.F. Spracker, H.B. Bush, B.F. Diffendorf, and J.H. Cook. They were backed by the Conjury and the Mohawk Valley Chambers of Businessmen Association. Of course, everyone realized that there was no truth in the rumor that the Beech Nut Company was in the market, and denial would not have carried as much conviction. Amusing, too, is a business, one of the largest in America. It was the amusement business, that is. First the circus and the medicine show, then the theater, which taught the rudiments of advertising to industry and commerce. The latter adopted the ballyhoo of the show business, but under the stress of practical experience, it adapted, and refines these crude advertising methods to the precise ends it sought to attain. The theater has, in its turn, learned from business and has refined its publicity methods to the point where the old stentorian methods are in discard. The modern publicity director at the Theater Syndicate or Motion Picture Trust is a businessman responsible for the security of tens of hundreds of millions of dollars of invested capital. He cannot afford to be a stunt artist or a freelance adventurer in publicity. He must know his public accurately, modify his thoughts and actions by means of his methods, which the amusement world has learned from its old pupil, big business. As the public knowledge increases and public taste improves, business must be ready to meet them halfway. Modern business must have its finger continuously on the public's pulse. It must understand the changes in public mind and be prepared to interpret itself fairly and eloquently to changing opinion. So that's the conclusion of chapter 5 here. And we're going to take a break here. I just went a little bit longer than I thought it was going to go. And hopefully you guys are doing okay. And again, this is a book by Edward Bernays, Propaganda. And that was chapter 5, gone through here. And then what we're going to do is go into chapter 6. We may not do that tonight. And then we'll move on. Okay? So thank you for being here. And we'll wish you a good night and you take care.